Good morning, everyone. Happy Father's Day. And I hope that however you honor this day, that it's a wonderful way for you. I guess you can see that I didn't make it to the Ministry Center this week to record this week's message. So here I am in my office at Azusa Pacific University, and I'm just pleased to be able to come to you in this virtual format and look forward to seeing several of you at our branch on Sunday. So this week we are looking at Matthew chapter 7, verses 12 through 14. We are thus continuing our series on the Sermon on the Mount, which I can imagine some are asking, why is it so long? Why is there so much detail? I think it's because if we can master this little section of the Gospel of Matthew, these 3 chapters, that gives us so much of the essentials of Jesus' teaching, I think we will have a framework around which we can understand what he's proclaiming as he proclaims the good news of the kingdom. So, a little review. Last week we were looking at Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 11. And in dealing with that passage, Jacob encouraged us to think deeply about what it means to approach God as fish giver and bread giver, not the giver of stones and snakes when we ask. And that mindset should impact the way that we go about our asking and seeking and knocking. I think that was a really good reminder and something I've been chewing on all week. This week, we're dealing with Matthew chapter 7, verses 12 through 14. Now, to be truthful, we don't normally, when we're preaching through the Sermon on the Mount, we don't normally look at 12 through 14 together. Putting them together this week was honestly a bit of a happy accident. It was an accident because of a teaching schedule mistake. It's as simple as that. But happy because as I got into the text and was aware that I needed to look at these 3 verses together, it really stretched me. And I think I've gotten a little better feel for what Jesus is doing in this little section of the Sermon on the Mount. Maybe you'll feel the same. And I look forward to any kind of comments and insights that you have to share as we go through this. So let's read the text. Starting with verse 12. In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Now, Matthew 7:12. We know this passage. It's the golden rule. In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. And, we know this so much and it becomes so familiar. Some of these texts become so familiar that they lose some of their urgency. Some form of this statement appears in a variety of religious traditions. But there is a little difference here in the way Jesus approaches it. Jesus states it positively. Most of the time, it's stated negatively. Don't treat others in the way that you would not want them to treat you. Jesus states it more proactively. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. In your dealings with others, always consider, how would I want to be treated in this particular situation? It's not avoiding the bad, it's rushing to the good. Reminds me, my wife is a nurse, and hospitals are wonderful places, but they're not places devoid of conflict. And Sue will come home sometimes and say, how come we can't just be like Bill and Ted and just be excellent to each other? I think Bill and Ted had a form, if you will, of the golden rule. And so thinking about that positively, proactively, running to the good, that's a healthy reminder. But that's not the thing about this text that really grabbed me this week. It's the tag at the end. For this is the law and the prophets. Now, Jesus is focusing our attention here. In fact, The term law and prophets, he's only used one other time in the Sermon on the Mount, and that's in chapter 5, verse 17. And there, the Ragsdale translation reads, "Hey guys, don't think I came to get rid of the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill them." And so here, based on what Jesus is saying in 5:17, mashed up together with 7:12, I think we have a pretty clear indication of what Jesus thinks about the law and the prophets, what it is. The law and the prophets connected with how we treat others. You know, the Epistle of James, something that my mother-in-law was very, very familiar with. You know, faith without works is dead. I can't tell you how many times I heard Ola in almost every discussion about Scripture or about religion, bringing out this idea that faith without works is dead. Later in Matthew, Jesus roots fulfillment of the law and the prophets in the motivation of love for God and love for others. These are the two greatest commandments. So treating others as you'd like to be treated is a way of fulfilling the law and the prophets. Now, I want to teach you a term. The term is inclusio. And inclusio is a literary tool that forms a set of bookends, if you will, around everything in the middle. And it can be a kind of lens for looking at everything in the middle. I think this term, law and prophets, gives us a kind of inclusio between Matthew 5:17 and 7:12. I'm going to play with that a little bit. Treating others as you would like to be treated means resisting the urge to exact retribution for a wrong suffered. That is treating another like you'd like to be treated. Loving and praying for enemies both is treating even my enemy as I would like to be treated. Not attracting attention to myself in fasting or in prayer is preferring others. It's not making me look good, it's preferring them and accentuating and focusing on the real reason why we are praying or fasting. Serving God instead of money is looking out for others as we'd hope they'd look out for us. Seeking first His kingdom is an expression of this very principle. Because when we seek first the kingdom, we seek the things that are important to God. What's important to God? You are, and I am. So too is the primacy of resisting the urge to usurp God's place in judgment. Don't judge, or you'll be judged. That is preferring somebody else, because I recognize there are things that are just above my pay grade. I could go on, but these are just some examples as I look at treating others as I would like them to treat me, and entering into the mission of Jesus to fulfill the law and the prophets, and looking at just some random examples from Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I could go on, but this brings this text home to me in some really powerful ways. So we've mashed up 7:12 through 14, and I've got to ask, is there some kind of connective tissue between 13 and 14? Between 12, 13, and 14. Just because I'm suggesting an inclusio between 5:17 and 7:12, though, that doesn't mean that what comes before and what comes after are unrelated. The question is not if they're related, the question is how they're related. So in seeking to tease that out a little bit, my mind is actually drawn to a series of statements that Jesus makes in Matthew chapter 5, 21 to 48. In every case, Jesus expands on or goes further than some Pharisaic conceptions of the law and the prophets. You've heard it said, don't commit murder. I say, don't even call your brother an airhead, which is, given who some of our brothers are, is pretty difficult sometimes. You've heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. No, 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 Jesus says. Love your friends and your enemies. And it's interesting to me that there's not any promise here of that impacting those enemies in a way that guarantees a reconciled relationship. Do I want that? Absolutely. Is it guaranteed? There are just too many things involved there. It does not absolve me from the responsibility to love both friend and enemy alike, insider and outsider. Whether I understand or agree is not the issue. The issue is loving them. All of these extensions of the law and the prophets are counterintuitive. They go beyond what our natural inclinations would be. And that, it seems to me, is part of what's going on and part of what forms that connective tissue with chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Let's read that. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. This passage, like 7:12, the golden rule, it's really, really familiar. Wide is the gate that leads to destruction, narrow is the gate that leads to life. And it makes me remember my youth and the ways that these passages were commonly interpreted. Kind of like, don't smoke and don't chew and don't go with those that do. Now, while that's easy and it's convenient, I don't think that's what's going on here. I think everything else that Jesus has said up to this point in the Sermon on the Mount needs to be aligned, if you will, with 7, 13, and 14. Does it match? And I think that kind of warning approach, don't go out and live a partying lifestyle because you're going to die, that, while it could be true, is not aligned with other things Jesus has said in the Sermon on the Mount. Consider a few examples here. The blessedness of the destitution of spirit and of hungering and thirsting for justice. The priority of the law and the prophets as fulfilled in treating others rightly. The command to love both friend and enemy. Jesus is offering a whole counterintuitive way of living life as it proceeds from the kingdom and his preaching of the kingdom. And I think that this wide way is a way then that is rooted in this life, in my natural inclinations, in the present reality, that only looks at the temporal and doesn't consider that there is a future, that there is another reality, that there is another kingdom that neither the moth nor rust can destroy. The narrow way is the way of love for others. It is not the way of avoiding every single temptation. This is a positive command. It is the way of loving others. It is the way of providing service to others. Give to those that ask you, and lend to those that would borrow from you. It is sacrifice on behalf of others. That is the narrow way because it is counterintuitive. The wide way is the way that would seek to only take care of myself and only look out for me. Or it is the way that would only seek to participate in a kind of false religion that gives an outward show. The narrow way is the way of humility, service, and love. It is the way, I suggest, of the kingdom. It is the way of life. And Jesus says, seek that. Enter through that gate. He is inviting us. It's not so much a warning. It starts with this command, enter through the narrow gate, the gate that leads to life. When he says few there are that find it, he's just stating a fact. If you find the ability to love in this way, oh, that I would find that ability. I'm seeking it, I'm searching for it, as are you, but it's elusive sometimes. When someone does, though, we notice. We notice that they're not seeking attention in the things that they do for others. We notice kindness, we notice generosity, and we notice love because it stands out in the world of selfishness. By encouraging us to enter, Jesus is inviting us to the kingdom, to defy the odds and change the narrative, just as He is changing the narrative. He invites us to receive with gladness the bread and fish that our Heavenly Father provides so willingly. As we who are heavy laden cast off the burden of outward performance to take on the yoke that is easy and gives rest to our souls. My friends, may it be so.